Okay, first things first. Anyone with epilepsy and photosensitivity, I'm sorry about the fluorescent lighting in the background. There's not much I can do about that, but we're doing the best we can. Alright, so let's get into this. To start our little tale today, we have the young, meek, and mild pacifist Anduin. And then we have the towering, hulking, brutish conqueror of an orc, Garrosh. Now, our story begins with the young, meek, mild pacifist Anduin walking up to Garrosh, and he has the chance to say one single thing. And all he says to Garrosh is, "I believe that you can change." The next thing Anduin knows, he's feeling every single last bone in his body shatter as he hears the screams of people around him. So, we have the future heir to the throne of the human kingdom, Anduin, and we have the orc war chief and conqueror of worlds, Garrosh. Two very different people, very different perspectives, beliefs, and ways of being. Now, why was Anduin there? Anduin was there to stop the conflict on both sides. He'd seen enough bloodshed, and he truly believed that Garrosh was an honorable warrior, and if he listened and through conversation, he could change, see the error of his ways. But as we know, that didn't go too well for young Anduin. He's got stiff joints now. So, we cut forward. Garrosh has been arrested. He's on trial for his war crimes. And he will not say a single word in his defense. The only one person that he says he'll talk to is, dun dun dun, Anduin. Now, why Anduin? Why would he want to speak to Anduin? So Anduin approaches his cell and they start off pretty poorly, just making jabs back and forth. The conversation gets a little heated. It's almost as if Garrosh didn't even want him there. It was just, one final little game. So Anduin begins to walk away. And then we see some emotion from Garrosh and he blurts out, "Why did you think that I could change? What makes you think someone like me, after all of the things that I have done, could change?" So Anduin comes back to the conversation now, and rather than go back to what they were doing before, he negotiates with Garrosh and he says, "How about we have some transactional communication? We take turns." And Garrosh cracks a smile, says, "Okay," he likes the negotiation, so long as Anduin speaks first. Now, this goes to point out that Anduin is quite a compassionate and empathetic individual, but Anduin was there because Garrosh was on trial. He slaughtered his people, shattered every bone in his body. Anduin was there for justice. Now, what is Anduin's justice? Now, I, as the objective reader, know both sides of the story. Anduin only knows one of them, so why was he there? Anduin was there for justice. But what would Anduin's version of justice be? Why does Anduin go to speak to Garrosh? Why does he? I would wager, it's a tough one actually, but if I put myself in Anduin's shoes, I'd wager it would be perfectly reasonable and entirely acceptable if he were filled with hatred and vitriol for Garrosh. But see, that's the trick. I put myself in his shoes. Anduin is capable of pursuing justice. He is capable of being fair and reasonable and remains committed to the well-being of Garrosh and the common good because he has empathy. Anduin made a commitment to care for and commit to the well-being of all people, regardless of his personal bias or preconceived notions. Just as a teacher commits to care for the well-being of all students through the practice of positive influence, professional judgment, and empathy in practice. Anduin is a person of integrity. He is a person capable of acting with impartiality, truthfulness, and honesty, no matter what his own personal bias or preconceived notions might be. Garrosh was comfortable to approach and confide in Anduin because he was the only person who could maintain their dignity in his presence and the only person who would still acknowledge his. Communication is central. to teaching. Anduin was able to communicate with Garrosh using transactional communication and negotiation. Once they agreed who would speak first, the conversation flowed, with Anduin, even though Garrosh is in chains, not acting as a superior or an authority figure. Anduin allowed Garrosh agency and the freedom to express himself and his views, and Garrosh knew Anduin would listen, really listen, without judgment. Anduin values the diversity and uniqueness of the Orcish people and their drastically different way of living, knowing, and being. And even now, even after all of his people have suffered throughout Garrosh's conquest, he still treats the Orc equitably and speaks to their differences with care and compassion. Anduin utilizes the power of positive language to provide constructive advice rather than criticize and shame. Now, imagine Garrosh as a troubled student. Is it not obvious why Anduin would be the only teacher he wanted to talk to? Anduin uses effective communication and the power of imagination to build positive interpersonal relationships between the student and the teacher. He is an inclusive teacher that understands their students as individuals and caters to each student's needs equitably and is better suited to support student participation, management in classroom activities, and create the least restrictive learning environment, allowing the teacher to much more effectively manage challenging behavior. I think the Anduin from this story perfectly embodies some of the APSTs and all of the code of ethics for what it means to be a professional teacher.